All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the third installment of the VP&P free webinar series titled How to Survive and Thrive During the Wave of Vet Clinic Consolidation. I am Kara Cray. I'm the program manager for the veterinary practice management program here at Purdue University. And I'm joined by Dr. Logan Jordan, who is the professor of our strategic thinking module here at VP&P, among many other big titles at Krannert. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, I'm very impressed with the number of participants we have. I'm super thrilled by that. It seems like our webinar series is growing and growing in popularity. So feel free, whenever you see our next invite emailed out to you, to forward on to colleagues or friends, anybody you think might be interested in this great webinar series that we have. So with that, I will let Dr. Logan take over, and we're going to learn some about about some of the trends that the vet industry is facing.
Yes, thanks for joining us. And I want to encourage you as we go along to use the chat and insert questions, and we'll pause as we go along kind of through the different stages of this conversation to try to handle some of these questions. But consolidation is kind of a big buzzword right now out there in the industry. It's not new, but it seems to be surging a little bit. And I think what I'd like to do is start by talking about what might have brought us here, what might have given this trend some legs in the veterinary industry. And I want to step back and talk about some trends. A lot of this is pulled from the AVMA economic report that comes out each year. And I would encourage any AVMA member, if you're a member, you can get that report for free. And it's 70 pages, so it's a lot to go through, but I would encourage you to spend the time to get that report and look at it for yourself, because it's very interesting and can advise you as you seek to manage in this industry. But in the latest report, which was late 2019, that came with several observations, one of which was the notion that while the industry is getting younger, the veterinarian mean age is getting younger, there's a long tail developing on that distribution, with people over 60 years of age now making up about 21% of the profession, where it was only 14% in 2007. Some of that could very well be because of a delay in planning because of the Great Recession, or it may be that people are just interested in staying in the business longer, feel able, or it may be trouble in finding an exit strategy. But right now, about 1 in 3 veterinarians in the industry is a baby boomer. The other thing, which I think we're all familiar with now, is that there's been a gender shift in the industry in veterinarians. Females are now 55% of all veterinarians, and 80% of new veterinarians are indeed female. And it's hard to kind of get your head around this if you've been in the business for a long time, but gender parity, 50% male and female, we passed that threshold in 1986. So this has been a long time coming, and is really going to continue to push forward in the industry. If you've tried to go hire an associate veterinarian, you know the next bullet point. They're in high demand, and AVMA estimates it's about a 1% unemployment rate, so 3 times better than the national average for unemployment. But the other thing, they're millennials, at least the new grads, and grads are looking for more work-life balance and more purpose in their employment. And AVMA calls this kind of negative unemployment. There are people that are actually wanting to work less and willing to take less just to get more free time or more balance in their life. The other thing we know about the new graduates is the debt load that many of them are coming out of school with is relatively high. And that creates issues, I think, as well for new veterinarians moving in perhaps to ownership in the industry. There's some other factors that maybe make consolidation attractive to investors. We're in a record-setting economic expansion right now, and veterinary service generally does not show a lot of volatility, so the returns tend to be good, and good returns can be found, and they're not highly variable. And the other factor is pets are living longer, and that's translating into more demand as well. Between 02 and 16, dog life expectancy was up about 12%, cats up over 17%, and of course, older pets have more medical needs, and that it's not just the number of pets, but also the growth of their needs. Finally, from AVMA, we know that the number of practice owners is actually decreasing. More individuals are seeking to be associate veterinarians, but still the number of veterinary practices are increasing, about 14% increase from 05 to 16, which translates to about 400 new practices a year, kind of the rate of growth of the country and inflation. So some high points, but what does that have to say about consolidation? In part, this changing demographics and employees and their desires may lead people to pursue less personal ownership and maybe look for other alternatives to both practice their profession, but also to exit the profession. We've got a lot of established players looking for buyers, and with low volatility of earnings and relatively good earnings, private equity has flowed into this market now, and consolidators are seeking kind of these stable returns. While they're not super high, they're reliable and maybe higher than the stock market on average. And we now hear of reports of multiples like 10x on kind of the purchases. So I take a pause and see if anyone has any questions or any comments about the trends you've seen in the marketplace. We're watching that right now on the chat. So if you've got any comments.
Well, I'm reminded of one big theme that was coming up during your panel at the strategy module last year with the graduating students of the Purdue Vet College. Was a big theme about mentorship.
Yes.
And how they really wanted that, right? They wanted, they don't want that sink or swim kind of mentality anymore. They want to kind of adapt to the veterinary practices that are going on and the culture of the clinic more. And I don't know if that will take more time, or if like the boomers seem to be adjusting to that or excited about that, or if they find it kind of a nuisance to have to handhold a new guy.
Well, I think maybe we'll bank some of those observations for when we get into trying to differentiate the practice, because I think that desire by those employees might actually be facilitated better by some of the consolidated practices, because they can put together kind of management teams that are engaged in mentoring. But that's also a way to compete against that, is to have good mentoring programs and a good culture in your practice, so to be differentiated in that fashion. So we'll go through that.
Another little housekeeping issue. One of the participants suggested there might be an audio program. We have had people in the back end working on that, so I hope that it's better. So feel free to comment if audio is still cutting in and out, but I think that we have it fixed now.
So we're kind of, everyone's worried about consolidation, but I think we also have to say it's still a fragmented industry. And we'll talk about what I mean by that. In 2019, only about 4,000 of the roughly 32,000 practices in the U.S. were corporate owned. So it's a very small percentage of total practices. But having said that, there's some estimates that like 36% of the total revenue in small companion animal space is through the corporate owned practices. So they're capturing close to 40% of the revenue, but that's still 60% that are going through the other practices. So maybe these consolidated practices tend to be some of the larger practices that are out there in the marketplace. And also the corporate presence is much higher in the specialty and referral practices than in just general veterinary practice. So that could be explaining some of that revenue difference as well.
We have a question here real quick.
Yes.
Does this speak only to general practice?
I
I think they're referring.
I think I just maybe answered that question with the 4,000 of the 32 and the referral piece. So they're all bundled together in that those figures from AVMA. So when kind of in the business economic space, when we talk about fragmented industries, what we mean is that you have an industry where there's no one player that holds dominant positions in the marketplace. And the whole industry is composed of a lot of small to mid-sized businesses. But industries can have huge players in them and still be considered fragmented. And in retail, we all know about Walmart, or to a degree Target, and some of the other major retailers. But there are many, many, many retailers out there in the marketplace. And we think about restaurants, you might think about a McDonald's or an Applebee's, which are large players trying to have their position in the marketplace. But there's gobs and gobs and gobs of restaurants that are locally owned and locally managed. So there are industry factors, there are kind of economics that keep industries fragmented, and there's economics that might allow them to be totally consolidated. And we'll talk about this now. So before you is kind of a list of different examples of fragmented industries, from dentists to farmers to ophthalmologists to retailers. On the list, I've also got pharmacists, and that's one I put there to say, over the last, say, 15 to 20 years, that's changed dramatically as there's been continual roll-up of the pharmacy industry and bigger consolidation of even smaller chains has occurred. And you might think about lumber yards, which every town used to have one. And now with the onset of Home Depot and Lowe's and maybe Menards and some of the other players, you see greater consolidation there. So when we say an industry is fragmented, it doesn't mean it will always be fragmented. Things can happen in that industry. But there are also factors that we're going to go through that allow you to carve out and find places to compete, even with large players in the marketplace.
That's a really good definition, because when I hear the word fragmented, I think it's broken, or bad or something like that. So I'm really happy that it's not bad. It's just the way it's set up.
It's just the kind of the ownership structure and the delivery of goods, products, or services. So the economic factors that really facilitate industry fragmentation are before you there. If you think about a new industry, something that's just getting off the ground, there will be many, many, many players that fly into that. If you're old enough to remember the onset of internet service providers, they were everywhere, and then they get consolidated down to a very few. So new industry is really not the case here for veterinary practices, but some of the others on this list are. I need to explain what scale economies mean. It's something we use in economics, and it really means the bigger you get, the cheaper it gets. You're able to essentially amortize your overhead costs and things of that nature, get a larger scale of operations and maybe make it cheaper. So if there are no scale economies, essentially if it means the bigger you get, it doesn't really get cheaper, you're going to tend to be more fragmented as an industry of more small or mid-sized players. If it's easy to get in the industry, if there's low entry barriers, that facilitates fragmentation because they're pouring in. If there are high exit barriers, it's hard to get out of that industry. It's hard to transition. That can cause more fragmentation because there's more players. If there's high transportation costs for goods or services, an example we often use there is cement, because it's very heavy to move around. You have to be kind of fragmented, although there's some large players in that industry as well. But that's an example of that. If there's a need in the industry for specialization, that can cause more fragmentation, more separation of firms. If you can highly differentiate the product or service, if people say it's not a commodity, that there's something special about how it's done at a particular location or by a particular firm, that tends to facilitate fragmentation. If there are laws maybe that prevent it, like government regulations or local regulations, That can encourage fragmentation. And then just if the customer prefers it that way, that can kind of drive fragmentation. What do we mean by that? They prefer perhaps not to go to chains, but they really want to go to something that's specialized, personal, and knowledgeable for them.
A neighborhood kind of feel.
Absolutely.
Supporting local business.
So that's the general list. I've tried to touch on that general list as we look at what might be working in the veterinary industry. And I would touch on scale economies first. If you think about how you deliver veterinary medicine, it tends to be somewhat labor intensive. The veterinarian, there's only certain things they can do. The vet techs, there's only certain things they can perform. If they're really focused on services, veterinary medical services, it is extraordinarily labor intensive. But if you're spending a lot of time dispensing supplies or things of that nature, that tends to be more like a commodity, and you're really driving on the factor costs of food or things of that nature. So if the effort is labor intensive, it'll help the industry stay fragmented. If it's easy to get into the industry, and we could debate that, whether it's easy to stand up new practices, the lower the entry barriers, the more that are going to come in. If there's high exit barriers, if it's hard to find a buyer, or you can't get out of the market, you will tend to stay in the market. And that may be in part what we saw with that aging of the ownership element of veterinarians, that they were having trouble finding buyers, at least for a while. The desire need for specialization, which I think is very real in the veterinary industry, with the referral veterinarians, people specializing on niches like canine only or feline only, home services, emergency things of that nature. The high product or service differentiation. And this one I want to key in on, especially the whole notion of the practice image, how they present themselves, having a caring practice feel. There's a lot of talk now about the fear-free practice. Anything that tends to make your practice look and feel and have the experience different than others that they might find helps you differentiate yourself as well. And then we would focus on just the fact that the customers prefer a fragmented industry. If we think about accounting, large firms have large firms accounting them, doing their accounting just because of the scale. But there's a lot of accountants and CPAs out there, and really it's a personal relationship with small businesses engaging with accountants to have their books done, and it's just preferred that way. We often talk in the VPMP here about restaurants, and people, when they're in my session, go out to eat. It's the last session. They're trying to enjoy themselves, I think, a little bit. And we talk the next morning about where people went, and invariably they don't go to McDonald's or one of the chains. They want some kind of experience of the place. And it's the whole notion that the customer preference really is driving towards having something that's not common or a commodity, but something that's truly special. So that's another area where there might be ways for veterinarians to effectively compete with the love me, love my pet element, and of course the human-animal bond.
Also being involved with probably the community too, right? The vet clinic has seen, I know some of the participants we've had in the program do a lot of community outreach, a lot of, funding sports teams or like charity events or volunteering, things like that. Community sees them as part of the community. They want to support the vet clinic for doing these things. It's sort of a give,
and again,
win-win.
That's the whole notion about the high product differentiation and or service differentiation and the customer preference, anything that can set you apart in the consumer, the client's mind.
Where are you going with this?
Where am I going with this? So when I've taught the strategic thinking module, we spend a lot of time looking at different business models that are in the marketplace. And for many years, we would and still do video conference with Banfield as an example of another business model. And At one point in time, I think people were worried that the Banfield model was going to sweep them away. And over time, they began to realize that was not going to be the case. But you can learn a lot from the large players. And that's kind of what I want to touch on now, is really knowing how Walmart might compete allows retailers to think about niches that they can move into, or maybe matching strategies where they have to be at parity with them on something like maybe cost, if they can. Knowing what people like and dislike about an Applebee's, for example, can help local residents maybe target their market better. And if you think about Applebee's, it's always they have a kind of a moniker about feeling good in the neighborhood. And if you go into an Applebee's, they try to make themselves look like a local place. At the local one here, there's a lot of Purdue paraphernalia, a lot of the high school paraphernalia for the local high schools, but it's a large chain. And the ability to which they are able to really make customers think they're local is subject to some thoughts. But you can follow a large firm like that, see what they're learning or experimenting with on maybe menus and things of that nature, and improve your local establishment. And conversely, when we look at like some of the big players in the veterinary market, you can learn things to help your practices be better as well. So I want to talk about a couple of these examples just so we know how these firms rolled up their own industries. And if we think about Walmart, was an example of essentially creating a chain. And what were they trying to do when they create that chain? Trying to get kind of buying power, get the data that they can use, information technology to help them make better decisions. Walmart very much supplied their stores like grocery stores did. So they had a different approach to distribution and inventory that allowed them to be more efficient, more effective, cheaper, if you will. All Walmart stores kind of look alike. Their program stores are very standard. When you go in, you know, when you turn left, you're going to see pharmacy. When you turn right, you're going to see groceries. They're all very formatted in that way. They're very cost control and very much trying to develop local management to move them forward. But when we think about Walmart, it's always low prices, always. And really they're kind of their key focus is being as inexpensive as possible. Another example is kind of like McDonald's. And McDonald's has pursued their purpose largely through franchising. They have some company-owned stores, but a lot of franchisees. And what they tried to achieve with franchising is what Walmart doesn't have with their model, which is local control, local responsiveness, kind of local ownership. So people locally that have some skin in the game. But many of the other things that they try to achieve on the cost side are similar to what we would see in Walmart, trying to have volume buying, a lot of training, a lot of control systems, trying to save money with distribution and model kind of volume buying. But we could go here today to McDonald's and get a sandwich, and Kara and I could get in our car and drive up to Michigan where our basketball team's going to play. It's 5 hours away. It's 250 miles. We'll get out of the car. We'll go in the McDonald's, and everything will look the same. And the price will be cheap. You might want to eat somewhere else when we're up at Ann Arbor after the game, but it's what they're trying to achieve. Formulaic facilities, a lot of control systems, a lot of one way of doing things to try to keep prices as low as possible. So when you compete in fragmented industries, we kind of alluded to the fact there are kind of two ways. And the first way is low cost, kind of no frills, very tight controls, tightly managed decentralization, and a lot of formula facilities. It's kind of the McDonald's model. It's kind of the Walmart model. It's rebadging, maybe if you're putting together a chain like CVS did. CVS in the pharmacy space bought Osco, which was a Chicago region provider, and everything got rebadged and turned into from Osco's to CVS's, because there's one way of doing it and controlling costs. But there is another way to go, and that's to really look for areas of differentiation. And I'll show you, I'll click forward for a moment to show you a picture that kind of tries to drive this home. The whole notion that there are really kind of two major ways to compete in the industry. One might be around cost and cost management. The other would be around uniqueness. And cost leadership kind of being an approach, or differentiation being an approach. Make yourself different or be as cheap as possible. Now, it's a little bit of a too simple kind of approach to the world, but it helps to kind of understand that if you try to compete in this fashion, you're going to have to be big, and it's going to be very difficult to compete simply on cost. And we always encourage people to try to think about this quadrant over here, the differentiation. How do you set yourself apart and create differences in the client's mind that they don't think that you're just another chain that's out there competing? I touch on this target piece of this. This is really looking for niches that you might be able to pursue. And also, this is a very effective kind of view. But really think about the two columns, cost and uniqueness, and try to be as close as you can on cost, but look for these spaces of uniqueness. And what might those be? Well, they're back here on this slide. The whole notion of looking to focus perhaps on geography, to specialize by different consumer types. And when we talk in our classes, we try to focus on this. Is there a set of clients in your marketplace that you could provide a set of services for that were especially tailored, that you would kind of like be the go-to practice for that set of potential clients, like professionals, like dual career individuals, like retirees? Is there something they need, something they want, some way you could deliver your services and products that were really hone in on their unique particular needs? Is there anything that you can do in adding to the value add of using your practice? Is it pickup and delivery? Is it boarding? Is it the hours you have? Can you bundle some services? Is it mobile? Is there any greater convenience that you could provide? And even wellness plans, which are a way to kind of maybe spread out payments, but also lock in clients for a year at a time. And if we go back to some of the earlier slides and think about specializing on a product type or a service segment, we see a lot of that in the marketplace, of course, with cat-friendly practices, canine practices, people focusing or getting a specialty in exotics, large animal, small animal, emergency, different specialties within the practice. Those are all kind of driven by medicine, but they're also driven by economics, because there will be individuals and clients in the marketplace that will seek those spaces. So again, trying to promote, you want to stay down here and try to stay out of the cost battle, because the cost battle will be very difficult. So being a consolidator, I would submit, is not a panacea. There's a lot of challenges with a lot of those. Some of it can be lack of ownership presence in the practice, especially if they're trying to knit together a chain. Many times they bring policies and procedures, kind of a sameness that might interfere with service. And I know when we talk to new veterinarians that are graduating from Purdue, they want to practice kind of the art and science of medicine and not have things very formulaic to them with structured formularies and procedures and policies. They want to really practice medicine, taking what they learned and use it. So
going back to the mentoring.
In large part, yes. Bigger companies begin to develop management layers. That can be a challenge. Some of the chains, there are culture issues with how their chain or their organization's perceived, what it's like to work there, what it feels like to work there. And even some of the consolidators now have begun to recognize the notion that there are negative aspects of the chain, that this customer preference piece is really coming into play. And a lot of the roll-ups that are occurring are making it very hard to determine who actually owns the practice. That there's a consolidator in the background trying to work on kind of management systems, but to the client, it's the same old practice it always was. So it's different ownership structure, but trying to kind of be hands-off on the people, the culture, and what that practice looks like. So that would give hope if you wanted to stay as a totally independent practice, that they're even the marketplace is recognizing that. So I'll pause again for any questions before we go into maybe some concluding comments before we have the kind of general Q&A.
I kind of a question here with your first bullet point with lack of ownership presence. I know you touched on that, but you don't mean like the owner in the building all the time. You mean more like overseeing and funneling down new directives and.
Well, if you think about how franchises work, they might there might be a local owner that owns like the Greater Lafayette franchise, for example.
Oh,
so they might have 10 stores, but they can be in those 10 stores every week. So they're actually close to what's going on, and they have a profit motive and skin in the game to make sure that chain is doing well in that area, as opposed to essentially signing that over to a professional manager that's looking after it. So it was really a way to be close to the community and close to a set of stores.
And of course, if we have anybody who's participating in our webinar today who works for a big practice like Banfield or anything, feel free to weigh in. We'd love to hear from you. We have a question coming in from elsewhere. Creating contacts and connections cost money. How do you recommend covering these costs?
I guess I need to understand the question a little bit more. So if you could get. They're typing. So really the connections to community and things of that nature. I think from what I've seen and the participants in our program, the employees actually enjoy doing those kinds of things. So they will volunteer many times to do it, and the cost can be limited, and I think it adds value. It allows you to meet new clients. You can kind of might become the preferred practice of a certain set of clients. And if we go back to what we were talking about before, when we're trying to find niches, this customer type, it could be clubs or organizations or things of that nature. So, when we had an event, they came to be a part of our event, and now I need a vet. I'm going to go to that veterinary practice because it's one who cares about what I care about. So I think it's very much the case that it pays. It doesn't necessarily cost. So some lessons perhaps to leave you with here. Again, back to these large players, I encourage everyone to stay engaged with kind of the popular press literature, the trade magazines in the veterinary space, and pay as much attention as possible to what some of these consolidators are trying to do, or even the large practices are trying to do, like Banfield, VCA, the Mars kind of group, because they can experiment in 20 stores up with a new approach and not have to roll it out nationally until they see if it works or not. And if you kind of stay in tune with what they're doing, you can follow those experiments and maybe beat them to the punch in your own practice.
The best way to stay in tune with those, the big consolidators, is to join our program, VPNP. We always have them on as a guest speaker in your module.
So, and they don't divulge a lot, but they divulge some, and we always press them to
you can ask
more.
Yes. You can, yeah.
And if they won't answer, that's an answer. So but Also, again, to encourage, don't be alarmed by large players because there are many, many spaces and market segments that people can compete in. And there's many ways to differentiate. In fact, not being a consolidated practice is a differentiator, and you can bring that to the forefront in your clients' minds and kind of make that a point of distinction. Um, the other thing to be aware of is there's places they simply can't go. There's because it almost wouldn't pay for them because they have to scale it over so many. But you can find a niche or a set of clients that's very lucrative for you to move forward with. So again, with bold to highlight it, the way to compete in the consolidated market is perhaps to go with the lower bullet points, the points of differentiation. Try to think about value add, try to think about bundling services, look for ways that you can find segments of clients or products or services that you can focus on and pursue those options as opposed to really the cost structure. Cost has to be close, but cost is not the dominating strategic lever, I think, in the fragmented industry.
You know, as you were talking, I was thinking of a question here. Do you think consolidation means independents are closing down or being acquired?
I think mostly it's showing itself as acquisition, that people are using this as an approach to exit. And there may be some comments from the participants on this question. Is this a window that might close? Because there is a lot of activity right now. Or is this just the new normal that we're going to experience? And this will continue. Private equity money tries to roll over in 3 to 5 years. So a lot of these consolidators that are being funded by private equity, they're going to need to sell or exit in some way, shape, or form within a couple of years. So that too will be interesting when it happens.
And I'm reminded of, I don't know if you recall Jenny from our previous, she was a year ago in our VPMP program, and her clinic was sort of on the deciding point of whether or not they should accept being consolidated or sold, or if they should remain independent. And I should check in with her and see what ended up happening, but I know that was a real question for her. If she were here now, what do you think she would say?
Well, I don't think there's each practice has to find their own answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of ways to compete. Now, there are a lot of firms, even some firms on this call, that offer services that allow you to get some of the benefits of maybe being a larger practice without kind of giving up your independence or staying at a 1, 2, or 3 location practice group. And you can avail yourself to those. And again, some of these different ones are consolidating practices in different ways. Some just kind of like say, we'll come in, we'll buy out some of the ownership, you stay, you practice like you want to, we'll try to do the back end. Some of it, if you think about how the VCA used to do their job, they came in, they rebadged everything. So it's not kind of one way, there's just very, very, very many ways. And if I think you're interested in trying to transition a practice, you might look at all those approaches. And then there's also the approach of trying to sell to an associate. And with the issues there might become the debt loads of those associates and how to make that transition work. Because the private equity money is a little more fluid, I think. So,
sorry.
No.
Do you think that the decision about whether or not to sort of be bought out or consolidated or remain independent should be a decision made by just the ownership and the leaders of a veterinary practice, or do you think it should be a full staff meeting where everybody weighs in?
Well, you want to try to have as many people participate as you can, but the owner owns it. So, I mean, I think you have to be respectful of that it's a financial decision, but you can make some trade-offs and think about how you want to try to accomplish that. So And money's not everything necessarily.
Sure.
It's how a practice that someone's built over time transitions, and how the people transition has value as well. So.
Mhm. And I was thinking back to one of your earlier slides about, all the different segments in the industry, and we talked about cats only and mobile clinics. And what do you think about providing like vet clinic over the internet? Do you think that will have a major impact on this industry?
Well, I know that they're offering human health medicine over the internet, and
Have you tried it?
I have not had to yet, but it's there, it's coming, and I think how you might want to stitch that in your practice, you need to think about, but you can't assume it won't happen, and you can't assume you won't have to compete against it. Educating the clients about the pros and cons of that would be good to start. It might be an entry point for new clients into your practice, but again, it's really maybe going to be a specialization by customer type. There are people for whom that makes a lot more sense, and they want to get their veterinary care in that way. And there's some that won't ever do that. They want to go see the veterinarian in person.
As well they should, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
There's a wine tasting class that we've offered for many years at Purdue that's now being moved online. So
yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
But they don't provide the wine online. So
Get a shopping list.
Yes. So it's coming.
All right. Anybody else have any more questions about the content you've seen today? Feel free to type in. And of course, if you are interested in the CE credit for this webinar, please don't hesitate to email myself at ceasterby@purdue.edu. I'm now going to transition a little bit onto our the reason that we're brought here today, which is the Veterinary Practice Management Program. We're going to do a little VPMP at a glance. It's comprised of 4 modules here. The first one being Human Resources, Leading and Developing Your Veterinary Team, which is taught by Dr. David Scorman, who was our leader of our very first webinar that we had as part of this free series. Followed next is Veterinary Practice Financials, Learning Where to Start. That's actually going to be held here in 2 weeks in nice and chilly Indiana. So that's a great one, taught by Professor Von Laser. Then we're followed by Marketing and Social Media for Your Veterinary Clinic. This is one of my favorite modules because it incorporates Bill Schroeder, who is a guest speaker for the webinar that we have after this one. And he does a lot of social media work with veterinary clinics. And then, of course, followed the cherry on top is the Strategic Thinking, Creating a Plan for Loyalty and Growth, taught by our own Professor Logan Jordan. VPMP is a program that's been going on here at Purdue University for a very, very long time. It's grown and changed as your industry has grown and changed, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I like to say that, you have leading faculty coupled with myself, Program Manager Kara Cray, and then one of the best aspects of it is your fellow veterinary students, veterinary professionals like yourself, all gathered together into this great 4-weekend long seminar that you really get to network, have a couple receptions with in the evening, get to know each other, share common complaints, common ideas, get some good friends along the way. We really have a great time. And then all that together, our next cohort starts September 24th, 2020. And we'd love to have you there. If you're interested in learning more about the Veterinary Practice Management Program, you can see a great website here at www.purdue.edu/VPMP. And this is what the website looks like here. You can click here for the schedule and fees. The program is, there's a couple different ways you can save money on the program, I'm happy to say. It's $19.50 per module, or if you pay for all 4 together, you get a savings of about $500. So pretty good. And there's lots of other, we're known to do a couple contests for some discounts and a couple of early bird specials that we'll be promoting here in the next couple of weeks.
Maybe I'd take a moment to talk a little bit about my module, which is the
yes,
4th module there that we'll be doing in about a month. And I want to key on something Kara said about kind of the participants. in my module, we try to bring out the best ideas of everybody who's in attendance to actually develop some action plans on strategic issues that people can take home to implement in their own practices. So it's not all theory. It's very much practice oriented and kind of solution oriented. And we start with a keynote, and this year will be the Director of Economics at AVMA is going to be joining us to kind of talk more about kind of general industry issues. And then we follow with focus groups the following morning to try to get in the head of both clients and potential employees. We spend some of the midday on that Friday kind of getting some basic concepts together, and then we start our series of breakouts. We break our groups into teams of 4, maybe 5 individuals from practices that appear to be similar in their competitive structure, what they're trying to do. They're never in the same town. We don't do that to anyone, but we try to find practices maybe with the same kind of issues and problems so they can work on those problems together and then kind of embark on that journey. We bring in Banfield again to see what they're thinking and talking about at Mars about the competitive marketplace, what they're trying. That's always an interesting conversation. We do some more on Saturday kind of issues. We tour the veterinary hospital here. There's always interest by participants in that. And then spend the balance of Saturday kind of working on these action plans, deciding what the set of practices wants to get a solution to, and then brainstorming those solutions, working the internet, working one another's mind to see what some approaches might be.
I remember one recent subject, one group was having trouble coming up with a good solution to, or problem to have a solution for. And one of them said, well, just sort of kind of branched out from this, but one of them suggested that, you know, their vet clinic doesn't smell the best. Like they were trying to ask, well, what kind of deodorizer do you guys use? What do you guys use? And then that conversation sort of blossomed into this whole project about products used and in the clinic and products that they recommend. So it was sort of like a product-based presentation, which ended up being very interesting and different. But it was just, they didn't quite know where to start. And they're like, well, it doesn't smell so great. And then that's where it kind of evolved from. And that was really fun. So it's a really, really great module. It's part of an excellent program here at Purdue. And we'd love to have you all join. So feel free to keep in touch with us, and we'll be sending out promotions and things like that as September draws closer. And if you'd like, if you're interested in more of our free webinar series, our next one is scheduled for March 5th at noon. Here we are, March 5th at noon at the same time here. It's called Today's Top 5 Digital Marketing Tips All Veterinary Professionals Should Know. They're not the ones you think of. So it's we're really excited to have Bill Schroeder come teach that. If you have any specific questions about webinars or registering for VPMP, you may contact my colleague, Brian Grimes, here at grimes25@purdue.edu, or his phone number is listed here. So thank you very much. Any final words, final thoughts?
Just hope you'll join us for the next webinar. I hope you'll stay in touch with us. We got a lot of registrants today. And I'm sincere when I say I'd love to hear from you, because that's how we learn about the industry and what's going on, and anything that resonates with you or anything you'd like to question or challenge or provide additional insight on, I'm always open to get it. So very, very much so.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.